And then we've got Dragonflight Legacies Chapter 3, which is covering Deathwing basically, losing his baps.
Deathwing being a good guy all along, haha. Recontextualizations are fun.
Is it that?
It is a recontextualization.
Okay.
Because the overarching thing was, or what players knew, was Deathwing, Whispered Zoth, bad guy. Deathwing, kind of bad guy. But now it's been changed into being more of like a Faustian bargain kind of thing of, I need this power, give it to me now. I don't care what the thing is, I need it for a good reason. And then you go, oh, that's Neltharion good guy. That kind of goes against what people think. Well, and I think that's pretty good as an isolated story. But again, it's like, will people kind of feel that and go, oh, hey, that's a cool depth of character we didn't have before? Or will people go, but I thought Deathwing bad guy?
Okay. So if it's just Deathwing bad guy, that's very boring.
Yeah.
This is very boring. This is explaining kind of why things happen. We know he was kind of influenced and heard those whispers for a long time before even this.
Yeah.
So this is just a natural, he's been opened up. He's already kind of suffered from all these whispers and shit for a long time. So that just helps nudge him along this path.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, doesn't feel... It's like bad guys usually have a thing called a motivation. And that motivation usually makes sense. Right? They usually think it is for some greater good, which is why he is making a secret army that he can control.
Yeah.
He's doing that to defeat an enemy that he thinks is a big problem. So,
hello, Arthas.
It's not a... Yeah.
No, that is literally just Arthas.
Yeah, I know. So it's not just, good guy, bad guy.
Yeah.
The reason why Arthas was liked by people is because, yes, he was a bad guy, but he was also the hero of his own story, right? So I'm completely fine with this. Yeah, I don't know. I'm completely fine with it. Now, I guess there is this whole Gauntlet of Order thing.
Yeah, that's one thing that I find interesting, is they've been fairly heavy-handed with, this is order magic, this is really controlling, and the Dracthyr not seeming to mind. And those Dormers like, you guys were, mind controlled by his glove? Is that reasonable to you? And they're like, whatever. He was fine, it's okay. And it kind of makes me wonder how much that ties into the dragons or the aspects being aware of the Halls of Infusion and what that's actually doing, because of how the Halls of Infusion might tie to the Ruby life pools, because they're fairly close on the map. And I'm like, hang on a second. You're growing eggs in magic water? Is that the same magic water that turned you all into Titan slaves? Interesting. Power at a price, is it? So I'm interested in seeing how they kind of work that throughout, because there's so little of it in the leveling campaign.
Yeah.
Except for, maybe with this stuff in mind, you'll have vague hints or whatever else. But I'm still not super sure how much this actually ties together in terms of overall storytelling. Or if it'll be kind of, here's the legacy cinematic, it's all about this. Here's the leveling campaign that's not really about this too much. And then loop back in later point. I wonder if that'll feel completely congruent.
I would imagine these are more teasing a 10.2. So I think what will happen is, we'll understand where this can come from because we know this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it will be very slowly developed upon, by Blizzard standards, which means very quickly by anyone else's standards. But I think this will be developed on in any endgame campaign stuff that we haven't seen yet, or a 10.1.
Yeah.
I suppose this whole old gods in order thing, it is tricky because that is at the very heart of Warcraft ish.
It's at the heart of Warcraft when you start looking into the lore, especially as seen through by Chronicles, but how much of it was, and this is the fundamental thing, where the story of Wrath of the Lich King was theoretically Arthas and Old Gods, and it kind of was. But the vibe of it was just experiencing all these changes and all these little bits of, here's a crazy Cyanide cave where people are whispering, going mad. Oh, there's something hidden at the back. Whereas it's very much more, that was kind of set dressing.
It was more boots on the ground.
Yeah, but over time it became less set dressing and more story. So I'll be wondering how it'll feel with like Old Gods kind of, unless they do something really interesting with the patch zones. It'll like, will this feel a little bit BFA-ish? Where it's like, why is this an Old God expansion all of a sudden? So I hope they don't fall into that trap.
I think with BFA it was always harder because BFA was promising one thing, a quarter or a third delivering that thing, and then delivering something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, yeah, because like, if you got really excited about BFA based on its big cinematic trailer,
Faction War.
that
Faction
was
War.
relevant until the end of Dazara lore, basically. And then it was Nazjatar and N'Zoth. So this time around, it's an expansion that is promising adventure.
Promising dragons.
Dragons and adventure. If you think about Wrath of the Lich King, like, yeah, it's about the Lich King. What they did a pretty good job of, though, is just making you feel like an adventurer in this big new place that the expeditionary forces of both sides have went to.
Northrend was a complicated place. Like,
yeah. So if they can get us feeling like adventurers, get us feeling like we're having adventures, then whatever things we uncover will feel like the result of, just how we're playing our characters, like taking them through the world, versus a patch being, and then Old Gods.
Yeah.
They need to weave it. They need to weave it.
That's what I'm concerned about.
Actually, the thing is, they did weave it. They did try to weave it in BFA. It just didn't work because of the other thing here. People didn't like the story.
Yeah.
So it's not just it's not just anything we're talking about here. It's that they burnt fucking Teldrassil, and that's not really what people wanted to have happen.
Yeah.
That's like the real thing with BFA. They just made decisions that people were not down with.
It's a difficult rope to kind of walk when you're trying to have all of these things actually work. Because obviously, you're going to bring in Old Gods. Well, here's a cinematic of Old Gods. Here's, Galakron tied to Old Gods. Obviously, this stuff's going to be Old Godish. It's like how many people will be frustrated by that because it feels like a broken promise. But again, like I say, that all comes down to, will it feel like, hey, here's your expansion, also here's some Old Gods, versus here's your expansion, here's your expansion. Oh, it's only half the size you thought it was. Here's Old Gods filling out the rest. I'm like, that's interesting. Yeah, but I think a lot of it to me comes down to, will the dragons restoring their power and the Primalist threat actually feel like, will the Primalists feel like a really built out threat? Or will they feel like jobbers that you get rid of in the first patch? I think that's one of the problems I think we might face if they don't spend enough time with Razageth, with the Primalist like kind of threats overall, because on paper and in like how they've added small details, they're definitely like, here's a load of disaffected people that are in the way almost anyone joins like some sort of terrorist group. You're disaffected. The world's not what it should be. Here's some like dictator people in control thinking they're better than you. Join us, the Primalists, and we'll have to resort to violence because it's all the enemy knows, but we can make the world a better place and leave things the way they're supposed to be. And there's a lot of detail showing that, but as to whether players who sit down and do the content will actually feel that is a different question. And that's where I'm like, I think the possibilities are, but I'm a little bit concerned to just kind of go, and Primalists, and oh god, N'Zoth's back, baby.
Yeah, I think what's important is that they can weave that. At least Nosdormu gives them the opportunity to weave that in with a character that is very natural and established within the lore. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think it's like, you sell someone a faction expansion. How do you get from faction expansion to Old God expansion? Well, the way you do that is backroom dealings that we don't see inside the game. Sylvanas' role as war chief actually being because of a whole bunch of other reasons that, again, we never saw and only learned about after the fact.
Oh, dear.
So I think it's just BFA is like a good example of probably the worst way they could have woven that together. Here, at least, it will feel natural. And I suppose it's also a case of like, a direction will have to happen. So we're going there because of Razageth. And, let's presume that the reason why we go there is because the Primalists are threatening us all somehow, right? They're going to do something around Tyrhold, something bad would happen, throw the elements off balance, they'll maybe try to bring Azeroth back to a time of chaos before the Titans kind of came and basically ordered everything.
Pre-Black Empire?
Maybe they want pre-Black Empire or something like that. But it has to go in a direction in the same way that Mists of Pandaria, it had old god stuff, it had adventure, it had the Horde and the Alliance, and it obviously had to choose a direction.
Yeah.
And they at least did a pretty good enough job of having that direction be woven through those patches.
I think Miss was particularly brilliant because the whole way the introduction to that was you land and then there's immediately old god shit that happened because of the faction divide, and that was the whole point of basically that was like a really well put together entire narrative vibe for the expansion, whereas BFA felt a little bit like say if N'Zoth reawoken because of the faction war, then that would be a mystery repeat and people would go, makes sense. That was a faction war. Look, our faction war did the bad thing because maybe we shouldn't be fighting all the time. But instead it was, here's a faction war and here's N'Zoth. Like the and then stuff. And that's where hopefully they're able to get the Primalists kind of worked in, because Razageth being just yoinked into the void in that cinematic feels very much like a kind of, we can't really show a full old god action scene. We don't have the time to show a load of tentacles grab Razageth and rip the piece of river. So there's a lot of how does that get resolved? Does that mean the Primalists are allied? How did Razageth get put in the Vault of the Incarnates? Well, the Vault of the Incarnates was Titan made? Or then, did the Titans go into the void and get Razageth back? I'm confused. Hopefully they clear all of that up and then kind of tie it together. But I think that's one of my concerns is they're spending so much time, and this is going to sound like they literally cannot do anything right, but they spend so much time with all of the side characters and all the side stuff and building out these factions that any major plot swip they'll do will feel like there's not been enough time on the A plot, or you really need to slow down with the A plot if you're spending a lot of time doing world building and stuff like that. So I more or less, my fear is I hope there's enough time, I hope people see it and go, oh yeah, that makes sense, I feel satisfied. And that's where I'm that's going to be the hardest part of, I think the hardest part of all of this will be telling the story they want to tell in a way that people feel satisfied with, because that's going to be hard. The world building stuff, they've nailed. It's just the progression of A plot.
Yeah, so it just goes back to the thing that has generally been more of a challenge historically.
Yeah.
I suppose at least this time, it seems like they have a cast of characters where they can actually make that work. And they have connections between all these different plot elements that, or at least the plot elements and the character stories kind of back to the lore. Those connections do all exist. So hopefully when maybe those lore threats, more than just immediate kind of character threats, when those lore threats begin to swell up, that should hopefully be kind of done via characters in the state of the world and feel natural to people, which is how it worked in the past when it worked well.
Yep.
That's what I would hope anyway.
It shows how much I know. Razageth broke into the vault to free the others. I've been intentionally avoiding some of the raid story and the max level story. I just did the leveling stuff. It's that's pretty okay. But I did it a while ago, so sorry about that.
Yeah, so for Deathwing then, basically the moment that was hidden from Nosdormu was where he kind of sealed the deal for himself, where he basically just goes, all right, fuck it. My order gauntlet is broken. I can now no longer really get what I want to get, I can no longer get that with this order magic. Right, I'm going to have to tap in to the void stuff and the old god stuff to get what I want. Hang on a
second. Is that not the story we all wanted from Anduin? I can't do things the proper way. I have to turn to the void to do this?
Illyria.
Damn it. Yeah.
Anduin, Illyria, something we keep on seeing. Right? And we keep on having these examples of these people turning into big cataclysmic villains. Mm-hmm. I wonder. I wonder how they're going to, what direction they'll take that in with the smaller characters. But yes, he turns to what Nosdormu characterizes as the deepest evil, which is the power of the old gods.
That's because Nosdormu is brainwashed.
That's it. Yeah. So then, that they basically are in stasis, right? If he could no longer control the Dracthyr, then he would have deemed you a risk. So that was the thing. He was able to control the Dracthyr with the gauntlet. The gauntlet breaks. He taps into old god power. But now he's kind of stuck with this big army of Dracthyr that I'm sure he could order about the place, but he can't guarantee that he can always order them about the place. It's like, what if the orcs didn't listen to Sauron? What would he do? Sauron, I guess I bring up because the thing that he was rather obsessed by was, in fact, order.
Really? Are you Is there maybe something to the idea of order that kind of ends up being sort of attracted to bad guys? I don't know. I don't know history at all.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Yep.
Yeah, so anyway, they're basically like, what the fuck? No, he was proud of us. He liked us. We would lay our lives down for him. But they're beginning to realize basically he wasn't that good because you did not want to. The point is, maybe they thought they wanted to, but such is the power.
Yeah. Which is weird because they didn't really have much time not being under the control of order. But I guess that idea of like, almost in the same way Mr. Jailor did mind control. It was kind of like not just you're not yourself and you're like blacked out while being controlled. It's more the subtle kind of whispering into who you are and the subtle control over you, which was all like the first one's magic. Change your sense of self to break that. So yeah, we could just sort out all the Titan problems by bringing the crown back to Azeroth and use that, I guess, technically, maybe. No, but it is the same idea. They're kind of going for like it's very subtly mind control.
Yeah.
Which is way better than just you're mind controlled. Way better.
Yeah, absolutely. It lets there be more of an inner struggle, and yeah, there's room for more. So yes, then we of course have got Neltharion abandoning his creations, throwing them into stasis. They are, of course, rather surprised about this. So yeah, there they go. And now we've got the yet to be realized purpose of them. So he locked us away, forgot we even existed. It would have been kinder to simply destroy us. I'm sorry, my young friend, we had to know the truth. Do not despair. I now believe that Neltharion locked you away because of what you might become, what we might achieve free of his control, and now you are free. So, point is, they're important in events to come.
I really, really hope this is important in a cool way and not important in a chosen one way.
Yes. I mean, they will get to fulfill their destiny, but of their own volition.
Yeah.
Is the point. So let's hope it's that, because they were always made to fight these Primalists. Now they actually do have to fight the Primalists, just that they get to make a choice. I won't spoil anything for the starting zone.
Yeah, it's like, basically it comes down to, will these feel like MacGuffin people? Mm-hmm. Or will they feel like rational actors as a group of people? And the amount of effort they've put into characterizing them, I'm assuming they know what to do and will have it feel correct.
Yeah, I'll certainly be interested for whenever time we go back to the Forbidden Reach.
Yeah,
I'm fairly sure they've said we'll go back there at max level, maybe in a patch or something.
I think also.
I think they said that. Point, I suppose, being there'll kind of be more to this, and yeah, well, I think it's kind of cool. They're discovering a lot of their own creation, kind of where they come from, but they're discovering it now, being beings of free will. So yeah. I think there is plenty of potential. I think there's plenty of potential. I think they look cool in like in this art and stuff. Yeah, it's just I suppose the in game maybe
it was a very strong case of worst foot forward. I think where they had to announce a new race and class feature because that's a feature of the expansion to get pre-orders. But also, they had to announce them before they could actually make you give a shit about them.
Yeah.
Which is in such a stark contrast to how everyone in the world felt about Death Knights and obviously Demon Hunters, where they made their own thing, but they made their own thing and said, hey, please buy this thing. We'll tell you why it's great later. But people obviously made all their assumptions about what are these fucking Tumblr twink lizards doing in my video game? And they still look that way, and they're doing better at actually making them kind of like, not necessarily relatable, but like
have teeth.
You have character to them. Have like, oh, I see what you're doing. But there is just a little bit of this feels like, oh, these are the super special. You guys, please buy them. And there's like a layer of cynicism that I can't dispel whenever I see like, oh, the Dracthyr have a special destiny. What about our characters? Bastards. It's like, well, you know, that's a bit unfair, but it's also, I can imagine people go, but I'm not playing a Dracthyr Evoker. Why have you spent all this effort making them like this whole range of characters and stuff? Which is where I hope the Dracthyr story is carried through by the leaders of the, like, I don't even know what to call them, the factions of Dracthyr.
Yeah. But again, it's kind of funny because in a different overall climate,
yeah,
I do not think we would have had this reaction.